Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidikena Yopakarotam Pravarmainam Patanjali Pranjaliranatosmi Stuve Patanjali Vyasam Shankaram Chamunitrayam Karta Sutrasya Bhashyasya Khamapirasya Cha. So, in the last class, we discussed the 17th Sutra, which deals with the mastery of nature. I already mentioned this in the earlier sessions. Through renunciation, detachment, dispassion, we get mastery over nature. This is a central theme that we have been discussing for the last several sessions. And again, I must mention that detachment here means non-identification. That's what it actually means at the psychological level. When we have to go through different types of experiences, good and bad experiences, frequently we are enslaved and the experiences become the master. If we can have control over those experiences through self-restraint or dispassion, then we attain mastery over it. See, this is a normal human experience. External objects control the senses, and senses control the mind control the intellect, and finally we interpret ourselves in the most in the most superficial terms. This is what normally happens to people who do not practice any kind of discrimination. Discrimination here means discerning mind and wisdom. Yoga helps us to reverse this order. So I mentioned in the last class, it's called reverse progression, or it's called involution. The yoga philosophy and yoga psychology are built upon the foundation of Sankhya philosophy. Now, what is Sankhya philosophy? Sankhya philosophy tells us that there are two fundamental categories. These two fundamental categories are Prakrti and Purusha. So, it is a dualistic system. I must remind you that the Samkhya philosophy is not fully accepted by Vedantists. They consider the Sankhya system only, they consider it as relevant only in some of its minor details. The Sankhya system and its practical application, yoga psychology, gives us a tremendous insight into the workings of the human mind. The emotions, the feelings, the attitudes, which normally guide and determine our character and behavior. In all these areas, Sankhya philosophy and yoga psychology, which is application, practical application of Sankhya philosophy, give us a tremendous insight. For example, you'll be surprised, the concept of samskara, which is a really great contribution to modern psychology. What is samskara? Samskaras are nothing but tendencies formed as a result of previous actions. Previous actions done with a great intensity and identification and total identification with the work, with the activity, will produce a residual element which is called Prakrti. When a number of such vrittis get accumulated, it becomes a strong tendency which is called samskara. Yoga psychology's unique contribution is these samskaras are not necessarily limited to our experiences of previous actions in this life, where there are tendencies and impressions which cannot be explained in the light of experiences of this life. Then by the same logic, we come to the conclusion that these samskaras have a cause, not in this life, in previous life. So this very concept of samskara, actually it's not Patanjali directly, it was Vyasa, Patanjali's commentator Vyasa, who developed this wonderful system. This is called karma, vritti, samskara, chakra. Chakra means wheel. Karma means action. Action produces a residual effect. And it becomes a strong tendency. And that tendency will determine our actions in future. And those actions, again, either reinforce a previous tendency or may weaken a previous tendency. If you continuously do the same thing, then the same tendency gets strengthened, reinforced. If you do something opposite, the previous tendency gets weakened. But anyway, this happens, this cycle. And this cycle is not limited to this life. Now, when you practice vairagyam or dispassion, what you are doing is, you are actually moving backward. It is called reverse progression or reverse evolution. So, to understand this reverse evolution, we must know what is evolution. And evolution is a concept in Sankhya philosophy. Involution means tracing the cause, starting your inquiry with the effect. To give a simple example, of course, this is called this is from mainstream psychotherapy or hypnotism. You analyze, you observe the behavior patterns or attitudes which are reflected in the behavior of a person. Okay, now when then you try to explain, and you explain to that person, maybe with a counseling process, why he behaves in a certain manner. If he gets an explanation logically as to why he behaves in a certain manner, then his behavior can improve. Because the effect has gone back to the cause. That's called reverse evolution, it's called involution. This word involution was first introduced in English language by Swami Vivekananda. And now in many writings, in American writing, you find, look, they don't acknowledge it, that's a good point. They use all these, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's better that we state at some point. Many American writers, including the great William James, who had met Vivekananda, used Swami Vivekananda's terminology and vocabulary, but no acknowledgement. The word involution is so commonly used. Even the word regression is nothing but another word for involution. That's what Edgar Casey, of course, we mentioned last time. So, I shall try to give a philosophical sketch of this process of evolution and how it leads to involution. So, as I mentioned at the very beginning, Sankhya philosophy posits two fundamental categories. One is Purusha and Prakrti. I must mention again, this is a dualistic system, not Advaita, not non-dualism. It is a system of philosophy which is helpful only in understanding the details of the functions of the human mind, and with regard to its conclusions, they are not acceptable either to rationalists or to philosophers or Vedantists. But the details are very, very important. So Prakrti and Purusha. Prakrti is by its very nature is inert. And Purusha is endowed with consciousness. So these two fundamental categories, Purusha is inactive, Prakrti is active. So frequently the Sankhya philosopher Ishwara Krishna, who lived around 6th century AD, has written a well-known book, Sankhya Karika. And that is actually a reproduction of a much earlier work. It's called the Sankhya Sutras by Kapila, who may have lived at least 2000 years before. He is the original exponent of the Sankhya system. So Ishwara Krishna, today mostly we learn about Sankhya philosophy from Ishwara Krishna's Sankhya Karika. He explains this interesting mechanism. Purusha is conscious and Prakrti is unconscious. The whole universe, not only the creation, the valleys and mountains, our body, our intellect, our mind, our senses of perception, senses of action, and this phenomenal world, all these are evolutes of Prakrti. So Purusha is inactive. So they go together, that's how the creation goes on. Not a very rational explanation, obviously. So Purusha has got eyes to see, but cannot walk. Prakrti is inert. So Prakrti can walk, but have no eyes. So Purusha sitting on the shoulders of Prakrti, they are walking. This is creation. This is not a very fun, very rational, intelligent explanation. Anyway, this is how Prakrti creation, the whole phenomenal creation is explained. So let me just quote it. Now, I shall explain how this evolution happens. From this inner Prakrti, first, the great intellect, cosmic intellect, is called Mahatvatam. The cosmic intellect evolves. From cosmic intellect, the ego is called Ahankara. And this ego system has got three dimensions: Sattvika, Rajasika and Tamasika. So from Sattvika ego, Ahankara, Jnanendriyas, Karmendriyas, which means senses of perception, senses of action. And also human mind also come from Sattvika Ahankara. From the Tamasika dimension, the subtle elements of the universe is called Tanmatras. And from those subtle elements, the gross elements, the visible phenomenal universe emerges. This is the concept of creation. So total there are 25 categories, 23 evolutes of Prakrti, plus Prakrti proper, 24, and Purusha, 25. This is how they explain creation as whole. As I mentioned, their analysis of human mind, their observations of the formation of attitudes and behaviors, that's very important. So the psychological contribution, this yoga or Sankhya's contribution to modern psychology is very tremendous and fully recognized by many modern mainstream psychologists, of course. Okay, now according to the Sankhya system, our emotions and feelings, our attitudes and behavior are all ingrained or enshrined within the mind system, mental system. It's called chitta. It's called mind stuff. In English translation of yoga, you may find mind stuff, which means chitta. So everything is in this mind stuff. Now, this mind stuff, it interacts with the external universe through the senses of perception like eyes, etc., and senses of action, walking, all these are activities, senses of action. So through these 10 senses, the mind interacts with the external universe. And when the mind interacts with the external universe, through these senses, we become happy, we become unhappy, we become anxious, we become overjoyed. So this wavering, these changing attitudes, they come and go. So evolution from Prakrti down to the gross universe, and between them mind, attitudes, emotions, etc. But suppose the mind refuses or stops identifying itself with these external experiences. That means when you go through an unhappy experience and it produces unhappiness in mind because the senses of perception or senses of action come in contact with the external objects, and as a result mind goes through this happiness or unhappiness experiences. When it happens, suddenly if the mind refuses to identify itself with the data brought by the senses to it. So, I don't have anything to do with this particular experience which makes me unhappy. If mind could practice dispassion, because after all this happiness and happiness come and go. Whatever comes, it also goes away. So it is not permanent. So when you realize the impermanence of these external experiences, that moment mind is detached from those experiences. This happens in ordinary life. Suppose something happens, it's natural. And so that's why when you become more wise through age or experience or education or rational thinking or discerning wisdom, it's natural. Happiness and unhappiness come and go natural. The moment you apply this principle, it's natural, there's nothing strange about it, then immediately mind is detached from that, the shock or the unhappiness element of that experience, and you are able to recover. Suppose a child or a young man complains to the grandfather or father, or something happened. Father or grandfather says, or a wise man, let us say, wise man or woman, say, mother or father, whoever may be. It's natural, don't worry, it comes and goes. Immediately, that young man will be able to detach himself from that unhappy experience. So, this is a kind of disclaimer. Like that, so the unhappiness is left behind. So, gradually, through this dispassion, is called Guna Vaitrishna Vairagya, so Paravairagya, we already discussed daily sutras, which leads to Samprajnata Samadhi and Sampragnata Samadhi, which are the subject we are going to discuss in the coming sutras. 17, 18, all the sutras deal with different kinds of samadhi and yoga, Sampragnata, Asampragnata, which are technical topics which require modern interpretation, so I shall try to explain this in the light of Vivekananda's interpretations. Okay, now through this dispassion, this is called renunciation, it's called Vairagya. Renunciation means you renounce your attachment, your obsession with that experience. So it is called dispassion. Like that, if we go on applying this principle of discerning wisdom to higher and higher level, then whatever experiences our body goes through, or mind or intellect, all these are practically dismissed as impermanent. And then what happens? From the grossest to the subtle, it's called involution. So involution means when you trace the origin or cause of a very ordinary gross experience which makes you happy or unhappy, when you trace it to its cause and its cause to its cause. See, the universe, external universe, all these are related to Pancha Mahabhutas, called Tanmatras. Like that, mind, all its functions are related to the ego, the Sattvika Ahankara, ego. So it's constituted by Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna, Tamo Guna. I mentioned last class. Sattva means serenity, wisdom, maturity, light, knowledge, awareness, etc. Rajasiya means activism, ambition, efficiency, etc. Tamoguna, tamas means it is ignorance, laziness, delusion, etc. Our mind is constituted by all these three elements. It goes through these different cycles from time to time. So once we identify the nature of the mind to this fundamental cause, then what happens? The devastating effects can be reduced. And finally, when we identify all these to the final cause, Prakrti, then what happens? We are able to practice dispassion. And when dispassion takes place, then mind becomes calm and quiet. It is freed from all obligations. First, when you practice dispassion, you get mastery over nature. That's first step. I mentioned in the last class the seeds comparison. You become master of nature. Two types of renunciation mentioned in our path to this mastery. First, after reading books, a lot of contemplation, a lot of meditation, a lot of intelligent thinking, we accumulate a lot of spiritual qualities. We become contemplative. We are able to link ourselves to a higher spiritual wisdom. Then, so long as we are not in close proximity with the objects of temptation, our mind is free. But when the mind comes in close contact with those things, the mind could be trapped. The first step. And that is like seeds which are not burned. If the seeds fall on the fertile soil, it could sprout. Bad tendencies, bad attitudes can become stronger, can lead to actual activities, undesirable activities. If the circumstances are conducive to bad actions. It's like seeds which you keep somewhere, maybe in a fridge, not in a fertile soil. Okay, this is the first step. And the second step, what happens? The seeds completely lose their ability to sprout at a higher level. It is called burnt seed. It cannot sprout. So you find in our website there is a very famous statement from Vivekananda. In our website, the Swamiji says, standing in the market streets of San Francisco, with all these vehicles, all these people walking about, all these activities going around, if you can experience calmness and quietude, inner tranquility, then you have mastered nature. You may practice, you may enjoy tranquility and peace only in a temple or a church or a synagogue or a place of worship. That's fine, no doubt. There are people who cannot even feel peace, tranquility, even inside a worship place of meditation. So, it is certainly better than that. But this is certainly the first step. The second step, even when you are away from a place of meditation, which naturally induces meditative vibrations, you are standing right in the market street. Vivekananda statement you find on our website. Standing here in the middle of the market street. The picture is on photo is there, in fact. Or maybe from 1892 or something. All vehicles, people moving about, horse carriages. Here in the middle of the street, if you can feel peace of mind, that is higher renunciation. Complete dispassion, where you have mastered nature. So, The mastery of nature means the effect going back to its final cause. It is called involution. It is called reverse evolution. That could be a possible explanation if you use an adjective reverse. Otherwise, it's called involution. Now, Vivekananda, while explaining this, he makes a very interesting, very simple explanation. So I thought, instead of reading Vyasa's commentary or Vijnana Bhikshu's Yoga I thought of Bhoja, I thought Vivekananda's words may be much more easily intelligible in his words. So I thought I would rather read from Vivekananda's interpretation of this particular sutra. That is, Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita, Anugama, Sampragnata. Where Vivekananda refers to these 25 categories of Sankhya philosophy, that means Purusha, Prakrti, and 23 evolutes of Prakrti, total 25. So we are now dealing with this particular part of the book Raja Yoga. That is 17th sutra of Samadhi Vada. Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita, Anugama, Sampragnata. Vivekananda gives a very... Now before beginning, I want to mention one important aspect of Vivekananda's contribution to yoga system. Swamiji did not quote from the great commentaries. But Swami Vivekananda had studied all this and himself had practiced. So frequently you find some flashes of direct experience in his interpretation. It is like, somebody explaining to you how to reach maybe Fremont, who had never gone there, that's one thing. But somebody who travels up and down every day, when he explains, his style may be different. That's what you find here. The concentration called right knowledge is that which is followed by reasoning, discrimination, bliss, and unqualified egoism. This is translation of Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita, these four Sanskrit words. Concentration means Samadhi, Sampragnata Samadhi is explained here. Sampragnata Samadhi means Samadhi with Prajna. We will explain, we will find out what it is. What is the Samadhi? It is that which is followed by reasoning. He will explain what is reasoning. Discrimination means discerning mind, wisdom, bliss, an inner feeling of inner bliss, and unqualified egoism. So, you read. Samadhi is divided into two varieties. One is called Sampragnata, the other is called Asampragnata. Sampragnata, so then he explains, in the Sampragnata Samadhi come all powers of controlling nature. A particular word is used, prajna. In some prajna means endowed with prajna. Prajna means transcendental insight. In actual life, it is what is called intuition. Now, intuition, the source of intuition is the source of all real knowledge. It is not a result of hard work. It is not even the result of reason. Rather, it is something that transcends both word and reasoning. Rather, but it doesn't contradict reasoning, but it transcends reasoning. So reason is not omniscient or omnipotent. Reason is only a help for us. It just helps that it prevents us from becoming unreasonable, irrational. That's all. Then the role of reason is to prevent us from falling into the trap of irrationality. So reason is very necessary, very helpful. But there is a higher source of knowledge, maybe called intuition. Maybe in the ordinary language we call intuition, but in the word prajna is a transcendental insight into something where it's a kind of hotline to the reality. It's a hotline. You get this conviction. How you got this conviction, perhaps you may not know. As I mentioned in the last class, that's what happens to all great writers, musicians, artists, even scientists who don't use too many electronic gadgets, of course. Because electronic gadgets bring our mind down to the level of gross matter. And this transcendental insight takes us away and takes us beyond the gross material. So, a kind of samadhi which is dominated by this prajna transcendental insight is called Sampragnata Samadhi. So Vivekananda says, in the Sampragnata Samadhi come all the powers of controlling nature. As I mentioned, either the external objects control us or we control external nature. Frequently, we are interpreted by external nature. I mean, the subtle may be influenced by the gross. So it's the evolution is like this. For the most primitive person, his body controls his mind. As he evolves, his mind slowly evolves to a higher level and gains the power to control his body. And as he evolves further, even his mental emotions and feelings and attitudes will be controlled by his buddhi, his intellect. And as he evolves even beyond that state, as he evolves beyond the external objects, the senses, the mind and intellect, then what happens? He identifies his true spiritual dimension. Then he is no more under the control of his mind or senses or external objects. So when you reach this kind of transcendental insight, which is an essential characteristic of this kind of samadhi, it is called Sampragnata Samadhi. It is of 4 varieties. The first variety is called Savitarka, means it is endowed with Vitarka. Vitarka here means reasoning. When the mind meditates upon an object again and again by isolating it from other objects. So that's how we get a full picture of what we are concentrating on. When we concentrate on something, excluding everything else from the sphere of concentration, from the realm of concentration, then we are able to get to the real picture of what we are focusing on. Then that's called a transcendental insight into the nature of that object. Okay, now I've seen this maybe when we are talking about yoga. I have already mentioned this happens to great artists, writers, thinkers and so on. It could even happen to athletes. See, a great footballer. I'm talking about I'm talking about what we call soccer. So you should not mind me saying. So when I'm continuing. So recently I read an article about a great Brazilian player, Pelé. Now, so for him, football was life. It was his religion and football was his God. Again, when I use the word football, it's soccer. Interpret it that way. It was God for him. Now, because he was so completely identified with that, you can imagine an example of this prajna happening at the grossest level of athletics or even sports. He could do things with football which an ordinary human being probably cannot even imagine doing it. So even at the grossest material physical level, this transcendental insight into what you are focusing your mind on or what you are doing, it brings out some inner faculties which are normally dormant in the human system. This could be what happened to Beethoven, Mozart, great musicians at the level of music or art or literature. It's an example of prajna. So I gave this example of Pele because to give an example of how this happens, total concentration or focus on something, isolating that object of focus from everything else. That's what happened. For him there is no God other than this round object we call soccer football. That was his life, that was his religion, that was his God. So, in that field, he got a kind of transcendental power. Which transcendental in the sense that not possible for the ordinary human beings who don't reach that level of concentration. That's why Vivekananda says, the first variety is called savitarka. When the mind meditates upon an object, again and again, by isolating it from all other objects. One cannot become a master of everything. It is jack of all trade. It is physically not possible. So, because the yogi can do that, the yogi never does it. For a minute you can do a great thing, but then see Vivekananda, again you find in his life, he recorded, it came in newspapers, he was traveling and some cowboys tried to, 19th century, remember, they tried to test his skill and he had never used a pistol or a gun any time in his life, and they tried to test his ability to fire, and he fired only once in his life and hit the target, you can see. So that's a kind of, yogi is able to exercise his power at his will. For a great musician, he may be able to exercise his power only in a particular chosen area where concentration becomes natural to him. That's the only difference. That's the difference between a yogi and others who may have this power of transcendental skill in certain areas, but there is no mastery there. It is mostly the result of extreme attachment, identification with an act or an idea. That's why you can't expect Beethoven to play, to excel in many other areas. But a yogi has trained his mind to such an extent that he has got mastery of it. But yogis normally don't do that, it's a different matter. So Vivekananda says, there are two sorts of objects of meditation, the 25 categories of Sankhyas. Now we are coming to Sankhyas. So, one variety of objects are the evolutes of Prakrti, the whole material universe. And also, things connected to our mind, attitude, senses, etc. So, there are two sorts of objects for meditation in the 25 categories of the Sankhyas. The 24 insentient categories of nature, as I mentioned already, the 24 insentient categories, which are the 23 evolutes of Prakrti and Prakrti itself. That is, the cosmic intellect, the Mahatottama Buddhi, cosmic intellect in Ahankara, and its Sattvika dimension, and the 10 evolutes, 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, and mind, and then 5 subtle elements, and 5 gross elements which constitute the universe. Total 23 evolutes of Prakrti, plus Prakrti is 24. So, one could concentrate, if you want, you can concentrate on this external universe, which gives you tremendous powers. This is called siddhis or powers, mental skills. But that doesn't make you a yogi. That could give you tremendous powers, ability, total mastery on what you are focusing on. That's one. Then the other kind of concentration, the concentration on the one sentient Purusha. Purusha is the self-effulgent, conscious reality. When you study the Sankhya system from a Vedantic perspective, this Purusha is nothing but the sentient Atman. So from a Vedantic perspective, this Atman. Those who want spiritual freedom can focus on this Atman. And then they will realize, if not in this life, the next life, in course of time, they will realize the higher truth. For this vairagya or dispassion, detachment are necessary. Dispassion or detachment from external objects, from the senses, and from the mind, from the intellect, and also from all these insentient things, and then focusing on the sentient Atman. Then we realize when we reach the highest spiritual freedom. So, mastery over nature, one, then freedom from nature. Mastery doesn't necessarily bring freedom. Because even after mastery, we must practice total dispassion. Then only we can freedom. That's why even extreme desire for liberation is a stage that should be transcended. So, but then of course it takes, according to the yoga, it may take several life cycles. But the point is, once we enter that path, then itself we will start slowly experiencing freedom in installments. So first, one can practice this mastery. Let us say, people who are suffering from diabetes but can't get away from sweets. It's easy, the one way, very, very simple way of practicing dispassion. It helps, or doctor's prescription also is a great help. So even the grossest practice of dispassion, detachment, slowly, but very slowly of course, begins to open the door to freedom. That's the... So first, mastery over nature, then freedom from nature. That highest freedom from nature is called Kaivalya, which is the subject of the last and fourth chapter of the Yoga Sutras. This part of yoga is based entirely on Sankhya philosophy, about which I have already told you. You will remember egoism and will and mind have a common basis, the chitta or the mind stuff, out of which they are all manufactured. The mind stuff takes in the forces of nature and projects them as thought. That's how mind becomes enslaved by what we see with our eyes, what we smell with our sense of smell, and what we taste with our tongue. That's what happens. When the senses come in contact with their sense objects, like the tongue coming in contact with some kind of delicious food stuff, eyes come in contact with some visual objects towards which we are naturally attracted. Then what happens? Mind is stuck, mind is trapped. Then what happens? Visual objects begin to control the mind. That's the opposite of freedom. That leads to slavery. So the more and more, the mind is trapped by external objects, then the more and more the mind is enslaved by them, and proportionately the iron chains that bind us become stronger and stronger. When we practice dispassion, we are slowly loosening the chains by through non-identification with the external sense objects, so that mind doesn't flow towards them, though you are in close proximity with those objects. That's why Vivekananda says, again you can read the website. Standing in the Market Street of San Francisco, if you can practice intense peace of mind. I'm not quoting, because I don't have the quotation with me. That's what Vivekananda says. Then you have complete freedom, you have complete mastery of everything. So we'll discuss, we have interaction now, and we'll continue this session in the next class. Anything to discuss? We have just about 10 minutes. Yes.
Sense objects that we're habituated to. There's a real magnetism, a real cachet to the things that we're normally drawn to. So they're disengaging, disidentifying with those sense objects. What happens to that energy? I would think that there's also something else we can give our attention to that we normally would give to these sense objects.
That energy is transformed into spiritual wisdom. When we withdraw, or when we withdraw the senses from sense objects, it means the mind no longer moves towards sense objects through senses. What happens? That energy, which would have normally gone or flowed towards the senses, will be transformed into wisdom. How does it happen? How are we able to practice dispassion? How do we normally withdraw the senses? You cannot do physically, impossible. If we try to physically, forcefully withdraw the senses from sense objects, the senses go straight with the greatest force and speed. I gave you the example, an Ayurvedic doctor told somebody who was trying to make fun of him. One man was losing his hair, and went to an Ayurvedic physician, wanted to make fun of the Ayurveda is modern MDs, all that. Anyway, he was a bit proud of his modern education. So he tried to make fun of the Ayurvedic patient, doctor. He told him, if you want, there's only one remedy for this problem. You should stop thinking of an egg. Never think of an egg. So from that moment onwards, his only work was to avoid thinking of an egg. He was very much aware of it. But you have to think of an egg to remember, oh, I should not think of it. So if somebody tells you should renounce wealth, your first objective is I must acquire wealth first. Then only I must renounce it. Something as ridiculous as that. And he lost his hair completely in no time. So like that, when we try to shut down the senses will automatically flow towards those sense objects. So let them flow to the sense objects. We should interpret the senses objects for their real value. Oh, these things, these sense objects are not permanent. There are higher things than these sense objects. That's called involution. That's why you are applying spiritual wisdom to roll back the senses to its cause and its cause. And so once you, in fact, these sense objects, which are the evolutes of Prakrti, which are changeable, which are inert, then you will worry about it. So this non-identification is a natural process of wisdom. That's called prajna. So when this transcendental insight grows, then we will be always thinking of something higher than these objects, even when we are in the midst of those objects. So there is no physical moving away from sense objects. Only a higher interpretation of the sense objects. We understand them for what they are. Then they are no more very attractive. When they cease to be attractive, then the senses are no more attractive. That's what happens. Say I can give an example. If suppose we suddenly get information that we have lost a lot of money in share markets, stock markets, whatever it is, people may get upset. But if you read a spiritual classic, something, and the book deals with the impermanence of the world, of course, when this happens, then we are able to interpret this loss of money from a higher perspective. So it is actually a kind of the exercise of our power of dispassion. Actually, this is called vairagya. It is called vairagya means renunciation. But you renounce it not by throwing it into the ocean, but through a different interpretation of those things. That's it. People may physically renounce things which be attractive to us. That would happen. People may physically renounce, but are still thinking about those things. So, real renunciation is a higher interpretation of those objects. That's how we start looking upon those things from a higher perspective. That's idea.
Swamiji, initially you explained something about samskara and chitta vritti.
Yeah.
The residues which are samskara will trigger more actions over and over again until we identify what those residues are. So, I'm at a stage where I can identify the actions which are similar and the results which are similar. But how or what is the process to identify those samskaras which are in us? And not just the ones that are from this life, as well as the ones that are affecting from the previous life.
Actions are external manifestations of tendencies and samskaras. Samskaras they function as internal attitudes. And actions are the external manifestations. And we cannot do something unless we have an identical samskara accumulated somewhere in our mental system. So actually I was referring to topics that we discussed long time back and many times. If you are interested, you can perhaps read, you can listen to the earlier sessions on dealing with this subject. You will get the address from YouTube or live stream address, bulletin you get. We have got nearly 80 classes in the Purusha systems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you. Now we have an announcement here. We will not have class next week because of the Thanksgiving holiday. So the next class will be on Friday, December the 1st at 7:30 p.m. So no class next Thursday because of the Thanksgiving holiday. Next class will be on Friday, December the 1st. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.